Welcome to Charter Local Edition in Long Beach. Today, Eric Bauman is back. He is chair of the Los Angeles County Democratic Party, vice chair of the California Democratic Party, announced candidate for chair of the California Democratic Party. But I don't want to talk about the Democratic Party right now. I want to talk about some initiatives that we can expect to see on the ballot in November 2016. Right. One of them deals with Proposition 30. As you know, in 2012, the voters were very generous and passed an initiative which increased the sales tax for 4 years, increased the tax for income on the wealthiest for 7 years. There's an initiative floating around that would extend that tax, not on the sales tax extension, but at least as we speak today, but on the tax on the wealthy. What's your sense, sir?
Well, as you know, California was in a tremendously critical fiscal situation. Our deficit was as much as $26 billion when Governor Brown came in. And with the fiscal tightening measures and the tough budgeting that the Democratic leadership and the governor imposed and the improving economy, and with Proposition 30, health to our state has been restored. Today we have a $6.5 billion surplus.
At least.
And
At least.
we're putting in billions into our schools. In the governor's proposed budget for 2016-2017, he's proposed over $70 billion in funding for schools. Much of our state funding is contingent upon a continuing flow of funds. We've begun to have a rainy day fund, so we're setting money aside for the inevitable downturn. But this extension of Proposition 30 will enable California to keep investing in the future. We've paid off most of the Schwarzenegger debt. We're beginning to tackle other problems that have fiscal problems that have hurt us. There were competing versions of the Proposition 30 measure. Right now, there's just one. It's in the process. It's been recently amended, and it's in the process of being qualified, so that it will make the ballot. It will enable some of those funds to be eligible to go into rainy day funds.
Yeah, because that was a big issue. The governor has been weary about extending any parts of Prop 30, and when there was a version floating around saying that those funds would be exempted from the rainy day fund, he was apoplectic.
Right.
At this stage, it looks like these funds will not be exempt.
Correct. They've fixed it. They've rewritten the measure. And it's going through the process now to qualify.
But at the same time, sir, when the governor was traveling the state in favor of Prop 30, he was very clear that these provisions would sunset. And so while he's been able to avoid the extension of Prop 30 sales tax, you know, the fact that he's willing potentially, or at least there are coalitions coming together to extend the tax on the wealthiest, you know, it just creates a sense that we can't agree to what we say we're going to agree.
But I'll tell you why that's disingenuous, Brad. Because the governor's premise from the beginning is he would impose no new taxes that the voters didn't approve of.
That is true.
And when Proposition 30 passed, we said these were temporary measures, which they are. And it goes back before the voters again. The voters get to decide whether they like the fiscal stewardship that they've seen and the positive outcomes of having all of that additional revenue.
I mean, arguably,
so it will be the voters who decide. It's not the governor extending it. It's not the legislature. It will be the voters deciding we're willing to go into our own pockets
again. And that's
again.
a fair distinction. At the same time, though, I wonder where the voters will go with this, because they did jump on the bandwagon in very significant numbers with Prop 30, and so we'll have to see. What will be most interesting to me is whether the governor endorses the extension of Prop 30, at least that one element dealing with the highest wage earners.
Here's what I can tell you, having been in politics a long time in California. Voters tend not to approve things that are blanket and they don't know where the money goes. But when you go to the voters and you say, we're asking you to raise money to pay increased taxes, to sell bonds for this specific purpose, and it's a purpose that they believe in and understand, like education, they tend to support it.
But this would be more general.
This measure has enabled us to put billions back into the schools and to bring those funding levels up to where they need to be and where they should be.
Let's talk about schools. There has been repeated efforts, to get a bond on the ballot for school construction. A couple of years ago, Democrats and Republicans had come together to get a school construction a bond on the ballot. The governor vetoed it. Now we see another measure floating around for $9 billion, a school construction bond. Governor Brown is still skeptical about it. He's concerned that the way state law currently is written, construction bonds favor wealthy districts. The initiative doesn't change that language. What's your sense of a potential for a school construction bond on the ballot?
Well, let's be clear. It is on the ballot. It's not potential.
Oh, it's now
It is
there?
qualified.
Thank you.
And there are negotiations going on with the governor around this ballot measure. It's one of those measures that could theoretically be changed.
This was done through signature gathering?
Correct.
Right, because the one that was, quote, vetoed was because it went through the legislature.
Correct.
The governor
So
cannot
the
veto
governor, right. The
signature
governor
gathering.
could campaign against it.
Right.
Although, could you really see a Democratic governor going out and campaigning against a ballot measure to build schools and fix schools?
I mean,
I don't think that's the
but
way
he
this.
could also be
I
neutral.
don't see that's the way this governor
could
wants
be
to
neutral.
end it. He could be neutral.
Which I think would be telling.
I think that for the average voter, especially one who has kids or grandkids, and who sees their schools are in disrepair because there's such a backlog on repairs, that there's such a backlog on building new facilities, I think voters will pull the trigger and vote for it.
How do we make sure, though, that the money is spent in an equitable way? Because that's what Governor Brown is concerned about, is that the way the law is written, above my pay grade, that somehow wealthy districts are favored.
You know, I'm not an expert in the mechanics of this,
Fair.
and so I can't answer that fairly.
Okay, I want to also talk about another measure that is likely to be on the November ballot, and that deals with the legalization of marijuana. Lieutenant Governor Gavin Newsom has come out in favor of this measure. You have Republicans like George Runner and Democrats like Fiona Ma on the Board of Equalization looking forward to potential legalization as a taxing matter. So it seems as if at least the political establishment anticipates passage. Right. Do you, sir?
I think that this is going to be the hottest measure of the year. You know, there were as many as 17 different versions of a marijuana legalization measure introduced in California, and they all had some similar and some very divergent content. Sean Parker, who's a billionaire from Silicon Valley, has begun to invest in the measure that Lieutenant Governor Newsom supports, and there seems to be a consensus growing around that particular measure. Even the Orange County Register has stated that legalizing marijuana in California will bring in at least $1 billion.
But they're libertarian, so we'd expect that from the Orange County Register.
I don't think they sit around and smoke weed at the Orange County Register.
You probably are right, sir. California, though, a couple of years ago voted against legalization. What do you think has changed to the point that most anticipate passage?
I think the first thing that's changed is you have 4 states that have legalized recreational marijuana, and people have seen the experience and seen that it actually works and seen that it brings revenue.
But it's worked, but there are issues. I mean, Colorado's is facing some challenges, and so there are definitely issues to consider.
You know, if I made you scrambled eggs today, there could be issues too. I could cook it too runny. I could cook it too dry. So we've got to make a measure that works for California and that meets California's needs.
But how do we? And I think it's a fair point. And use the experiences of Alaska, Colorado.
The drafters of the measure, the policy people who worked on it, studied Oregon and Colorado in particular to learn what they did, how it worked, and that is why this seems to be the collective measure.
Do you anticipate that the California Democratic Party will come out one way or the other on the measure?
Yes.
And that way will be
to support it.
What do you make of that? Are you concerned that will be seen as too progressive?
No. I think that people have ever since Bill Clinton didn't inhale, I've been progressively moving away from that being an issue like that.
His name is Eric Bauman. He is a candidate for chair of the California Democratic Party, currently vice chair and chair of the LA Democratic Party. I'm Brad Pomerance in Long Beach. It's Charter Local Edition.